Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is for any of you bronzer lovers out there. We are going to be ranking the bronzers that I have in my collection. You may have seen these type of videos popping up around YouTube. I have been watching quite a few of them lately and have been absolutely loving them. So I thought it'd be fun to sit down and do it with you guys. Now, I am going to say that I think ranking my bronzers is a bit like asking me to rank my children. I could never really possibly do that, but this is something that's really more for fun. I love all of my bronzers, but we're going to do our best today to try and rank these based on a lot of different things. I'm really taking everything into consideration. Formulas, colors, how versatile the bronzer is, how often I reach for it, and also price point. So I went through my bronzer collection. I counted up 15 bronzers that I still have in my collection. I want to say this though, I think there's probably one or two maybe in here that I could possibly declutter, but I went ahead and left them in here anyways, just because I thought it would be fun to share with you guys kind of some of the older stuff that I've hung on to for a while. So hopefully you guys are excited about this one. If you are, make sure that you are subscribed to my channel, and with that said, let's go ahead and jump right in. So we're going to kick things off with number 15. This is probably my least favorite, least reach for bronzer in my collection, and this thing is very, very old. If you have been watching beauty videos here on YouTube for, let's say, 7 to 10 years, you might remember this bronzer being all the rage back in the day, and it is the NYC bronzer in the color Sunny. But this is it right here. It actually is a really nice bronzer. It's a warmer, somewhat of a red undertone bronzer, which I think works really well for certain looks that I'm doing, but I think this is a great formula. If any of you guys still have this floating around your collection, let me know. Let me know if at some point you have owned this thing. Mine is definitely, I don't remember it smelling. It smells a little like baby powder to me. I don't remember it smelling like that, but it might just be that was back before it had experienced the wonderful smell of like the butter bronzer or the chocolate soleil bronzer. This is one that I probably could declutter, but I keep it more for just kind of the sentimental value and for memory's sake. Moving on to number 14. There was a day that this was my kind of holy grail bronzer. In fact, this one is probably my most repurchased bronzer of all time, and it is by e.l.f. It is their golden bronzer. It's kind of one of these like bronzing quads. This is another one that I remember people used to talk about this a lot here on YouTube. I believe they do still make this at e.l.f. It is a really nice bronzer, but it's very, very shimmery. I probably should be swatching these for you guys. Typically when I do use this one, I do just kind of swirl all the shades together, and it kind of serves as a bit of like a highlighting type of bronzer. It's a very versatile bronzer if you like glow on your cheeks. It is very shimmery though, and I have found in the last several years that as I'm getting a little bit more texture around my nose and on my cheeks, this tends to emphasize more texture than I like. But if you were to ask me 6 years ago what my favorite bronzer was, it probably would have been this one. Moving on to number 13. So this is a cream bronzer, and it's by the brand Wet n Wild. I don't know if you guys have seen these kind of contour sticks that they have. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't use this a whole lot, but I've recently started to get an interest in starting to use cream bronzers a little bit more. And also, if you happen to watch Tati here on YouTube, she recently had Scott Barnes, who is a celebrity makeup artist, appear on her channel. But he did her makeup and he talked a bit about cream bronzer. He used cream bronzer on her. He uses cream bronzer on J.Lo, and it really got me interested in cream bronzers. It's one of those things I think I just have not really delved into very much, but I've been using this thing quite a bit for the last, I think it's been like a week or two. I'm wearing it underneath another bronzer today, and I think this gives you such a beautiful, naturally sculpted glow that just looks like it's coming from your natural skin. But I have been enjoying this one. This is in the color Where's Walnut, and I do love how this blends out. It's a really nice consistency. It just kind of warms up my face, and I love topping it with another bronzer, and I also find that helps my bronzer last on my skin all day long. Moving on to number 12. This one is by ColourPop, and this is the ColourPop bronzer in the color After Party. This is a really nice bronzer. In fact, I debated ranking this a little bit higher, but I honestly just don't reach for this one all that often. I think it works really nicely. The one thing that I do find with this bronzer, and one thing that I really know about my own bronzer taste, is I generally prefer bronzers that are much more firmly pressed. When they're very pigmented and very loosely pressed, which I do find this one to be, I don't like to reach for them quite as much because 1, they're messy, 2, I feel like I'm wasting product, and 3, I just like my bronzers to be a little bit more buildable. I like to really be able to work the bronzer product into my brush. I can't do that on a bronzer like this, or I will just get way too much product on my brush. But when I go in with a light hand and with the right brush, I do think this is a really nice bronzer formula. It should probably be, I keep forgetting to swatch these for you guys. But here it is right here. It's a really nice, very neutral color. It's kind of right there in between a bronzer and a contour. You can kind of use it to do both. It really is a nice product. I do love that it's affordable. It's just not one that I reach for as much as I thought that I would. Moving on to this one. This one is relatively new to me. Is the Wet n Wild Color Icon Bronzer in the color Sunset Striptease. I talked about this in a recent video. Don't be fooled by the fact that this little spot is showing right here. I have not hit pan on this bronzer. My daughter got into this bronzer, dug her fingernail or a brush or something into it, and that's kind of what happened. So this bronzer I do think is a really nice bronzer formula. It's a nice warm bronzer. I mentioned in that video that this has the most unique texture when you touch it. It truly feels like a velvet couch. I know I've said that before, but it's just a very unique texture. There it is right here. It isn't super pigmented or super powdery, which I do really enjoy. It has a very nice satin sort of finish. I recommend this one. I think the price point on this is fantastic. I just think there's other bronzers in my collection that I like a little bit more and that I reach for a little bit more. Moving on to another one by Wet n Wild that I'm sure all of you have heard of if you've been watching YouTube videos for a while, and it is this duo right here. This is their contouring palette in the color Dolce de Leche. This is a really nice bronzer as well. I think the color on this one is really like perfection. It's just the perfect mix between a warm and a cool. But again, the thing I don't love as much about this bronzer is that it's so powdery. This is again one of those I have to be very light-handed with. It gives me a lot of powder kickback. These two I kind of struggled on placement. The only reason I ranked this one a little bit higher, because I've had it longer, I definitely have used it quite a bit more, and it definitely is a great color and one that I think would be good for anyone. It's a matte bronzer, but it has a very nice buttery consistency, and if you are someone that doesn't mind a powdery product, I think that you absolutely would love this one. Moving on to number 9. This one is by Bare Minerals. This is their Invisible Bronzer in the color Fair to Light. This is one that I feel like I probably should have put this a little bit higher, but there were a couple of reasons that I couldn't put this one higher. The first reason being that the color of this bronzer really will probably not work for me in the summertime. You can maybe barely see it right here. It's very light, which for me works great in the middle of the winter, but I know that this is just not going to show up on my skin in the summertime. If you are extremely fair, I think you would absolutely love this bronzer because it, again, is very light. It's very subtle. I love the finish of this. It's kind of one of those baked formulas, so it does have quite a bit of luminosity to it, but it's not shimmery, if that makes sense. It's just a beautiful finish, beautiful formula, very firmly pressed, which is just how I like my bronzers. I like that I can really kind of dig my brush in there. I'm very interested in picking up the next shade down. I believe they have these on sale right now during the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty, but it is a really nice formula. I just think because it's relatively new to my collection and I can't use it all year long, that's why it's ranked at number 9. Moving on to number 8. Now I do want to say this. I think everything from the number 9, the Bare Minerals bronzer, all the way on up to number 1 are all bronzers that I especially really love. So even though this bronzer is ranked number 8, it still is one of my favorite bronzers. And I say that very loosely because I have a lot of favorites when it comes to not just my bronzers, but my makeup collection in general. This one is the number 7 bronzer. This one is in the color Maple. But this is a fantastic bronzer from the drugstore. I love the formula of these. They are just how I like them. They're matte with a little bit of like a satin sort of finish, but they also are very firmly pressed. They're very buildable. It's not overly pigmented or dark. Here it is right here. You can barely see this one. That's the hard thing about bronzers, and the ones that I like usually don't show up very intensely, but there it is right there. Don't mind my little birthmark right here. But I do find this one I actually can wear in the summertime. I just have to really build it up, but if I'm going for that very subtly bronzed look, if my skin's already kind of naturally bronzed from just being out in the sun and being a little bit tan, I still can use this bronzer. I still love this bronzer. I love the formula of this one. In fact, I've had this one for over a year now. I probably should check that they still sell these. Definitely one of my favorites in my collection. I do reach for this one quite a bit. Moving on to number 7. This is one that I think is severely underrated, and it is the e.l.f. bronzer palette. They may have changed the name of these. I will list the current name of this one up here if I can find it online. Clearly I use this one quite a bit more than the other ones, but I do get a lot of use out of every shade in here. I love even just combining all these shades together if I just want a quick wash of color on the cheeks. So these two right here are matte. Let me swatch these ones for you. I'm kind of running out of room. We'll go right over my birthmark right there. You can see this one has a little bit more of like almost like a rosy kind of undertone to it, which I think works really great for certain looks and when I'm a little bit more tan. And these two right here, will go kind of right next to it, are the shimmery ones. You have a little bit more of a warm tone one right here. Very nice formula, very affordable. I believe these are $10. Not a lot of people talk about this bronzer, but I've had this one in my collection for I think a couple of years now, and I love Love this bronzer. I always am happy with the result when I grab this one. I think it's such a great underrated bronzer from the drugstore. Moving on to number 6. This is one that I know you guys have heard me talk about before. I love this bronzer. It is the Essence Sun Club Matte Bronzing Powder in the shade 01 Natural. This is such a beautiful drugstore bronzer. So many things I love about this bronzer. I love the formula of this. It's very nice and buttery, but it's not powdery. It's very buildable. It's not overly dark. It definitely is a warmer bronzer, and the price on this is incredible. I think this is $4 or $5 from Ulta. I just love this one. I need to start reaching for it more. It's such a nice formula. You can see it's quite light and it is quite warm, but I just love how this warms up your cheeks in such a subtle way. Really great, affordable bronzer from the drugstore. Moving on to bronzer number 5. This one, I was not quite sure where to put this bronzer. It is the Marc Jacobs Tantastic Bronzer. This bronzer is relatively new to my collection. I bought this during the holiday VIB sale that Sephora did, which I know was a little while ago, but I don't reach for this super often because it has a bit higher of a price tag on it. Sometimes I can be a little bit more conservative with how often I use my high-end makeup products. I know that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but there's just something about the price tag of this one that makes me a little bit uneasy reaching for it all the time, which I know is kind of the opposite of how I should be. I should get use out of my expensive makeup products. It is a really great formula. It's nice and buildable. You get the tiniest bit of powder kickback in here, but it's nothing really intense. I still find it to be really nice and buildable. I find this one to be mostly matte with just a touch of a satin finish to it. It's a really beautiful finish and color on the cheeks. The only reason I would say I'm ranking it lower is because 1, I haven't had it for super long, and 2, I just don't reach for it as much as I think that I should. Let me know if you guys have tried out this bronzer, if you have it in your collection. What do you guys think about this one? Do you think it is worth the price tag? Do you think it's worth all the hype that it gets? I'd love to know your thoughts if you have any thoughts about this very, very expensive bronzer. Moving on to number 4. This one is brand new to my collection, and I kind of hesitated ranking it so highly because it is so new, but guys, this is just such a good bronzer. I just knew instantly this was like the perfect bronzer formula, and it is the Milani Silky Matte Bronzer in the color 01. This is just a really nice quality bronzer. If you have extremely fair skin and you don't want an overly warm bronzer, I think this would be such a perfect fit for you. This one's a little bit more cool, but it does still warm up your complexion in such a nice way. It's very buildable, perfect formula. It smells a little bit like the Butter Bronzer by Physicians Formula. Such a beautiful one. I love the packaging of this thing. One thing I will say about this one though, again, it's newer to my collection, and I am a little bit concerned that this probably won't show up on my skin in the summertime. As you can see from the swatch on the underside of my arm, which is also the palest part of my body, it is quite light, which makes me think in the summertime when I'm a little bit more tan, this probably won't show up on my skin very well. But I love the formula of this so much that I'm putting it at number 4 anyways, and I'm definitely interested to pick up one of the darker shades that they have for the summertime. I just think these are fantastic. I think Milani killed it with this bronzer release. Moving on to number 3, this is the Too Faced Chocolate Soleil Bronzer. This is the Milk Chocolate Soleil. So this is the lightest shade that they have in the Chocolate Soleil range. This is a very light toned bronzer. This one has almost a yellow sort of undertone. I don't know that you can tell. I mean, this swatch I feel like is barely showing up, but it has a bit more of like a yellow warm undertone than an orange warm undertone. So I think if you're extremely fair skinned, this would be a really good option for you because it will show up on your skin, but also not look overly orange or overly warm. It looks really natural. I love the formula of these. The smell is heavenly. I just enjoy using these ones so much. They have changed the packaging on these ones, and I will say these ones are actually on sale during the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty. During that last week, these are on sale for half off. I definitely recommend picking one of these up. This and the darker shade are in my top 3. That tells you guys how much I love this bronzer formula. I've loved it for years and years and years, and I will continue to love it until the end of time. That is how much I love the Too Faced chocolate bronzers. Moving on to my number 2, this may not surprise anyone. It is the Butter Bronzer. Who does not love this bronzer? This is such a fantastic bronzer from the drugstore. Every time I use this one, I wonder why I reach for anything else. The experience of putting this on is so enjoyable because the consistency is so perfect, has the perfect amount of pigmentation, but also buildability. It's not overly intense or pigmented. Such an enjoyable experience to smell this while you're applying it. It's just such a fantastic bronzer from the drugstore. I have mine in the light bronzer version, but I do find this still to show up on my skin tone even in the middle of the summer. I just have to add a little bit more. And last, my number 1 ranked bronzer, I have to give it to the Chocolate Soleil Bronzer by Too Faced. This is the medium one. I love this bronzer because it works for me all year round. Now, in the middle of winter, this is definitely more of a sort of contour for me, so I usually like to combine this with something that's a little bit more light toned, like say the lighter tone of this one, or even the Milani bronzer, or maybe the Invisible Bronze by Bare Minerals. But I love starting with this one as a contour, and I love how buildable this is. I think this is a bronzer that could work for so many different skin tones depending on how much product you load up on your brush. The chocolate scent is so delicious, and I just love the color of this one. It's just kind of that perfect cross between something that can sculpt things out a little bit but also warm up your complexion. Here is the swatch right here, and again, I think that this is just one of those bronzers that you really have to like build up. You can see that even though it's kind of dark on my finger, it really takes some time to build this thing up, which is what makes it so wearable and so workable for me, regardless of what time of year it is. I can really go kind of crazy with my brush in here and not go over the top. Again, these bronzers will be on sale during the last week of the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty, so if you're looking for a great bronzer in your collection, I think if you pick this up on sale, it actually is going to be a little bit cheaper even than the Butter Bronzer by Physicians Formula. Love these both, but I will say if this one's on sale, I would totally go for this one. I think it's so fantastic. Nothing has knocked this thing out of its #1 spot, and it's been there for a couple of years for me. Alright you guys, and that is it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed me ranking my bronzers. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts on any of these bronzers. Do you love them? Did they not work for you? And of course, if you have recommendations for bronzers maybe I don't have or haven't tried yet, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, because a girl can never have too many bronzers or highlights or blushes or eyeshadow palettes. Thank you guys again for stopping by. I hope that you guys have a great day. I hope that you'll subscribe before I leave, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.